Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Forman. Today we got Jake Sachs with us. Jake, welcome.
Thank you.
And we are reviewing the Gerry Lopez gliders that are produced by Surftech in their NFT Construction, which is an EPS epoxy flax cloth. So like an organic kind of like, what would that be? Like It's E something. Environmentally friendly, E-friendly. E-friendly construction.
Yeah.
And these boards are sick.
They are sick.
Yeah, they are super fun. I've been personally surfing these things since like mid-August last year, right? So almost coming up on a year.
Yeah.
Jake's got the 9.6, I got the 10.6. Let's start out by just reading some dimensions. The 10.6 is 10.6, 23 1/4, 3 3/8, 95 liters, and it is a single fin. Jake, what are the dimensions on that one?
You got 9.6, 23 wide by 3 1/4, and it's 81.5 liters. Also
Okay.
single fin.
Single fin as well.
And that board makes you look small. It makes you look like you're 5'2".
But okay, so let's get into you know, how these boards surf, like who they're good for, what they do, and
because the gliders are often misunderstood.
nobody knows what a glider is. They have no idea.
Yeah.
They at first they're like, is that a stand-up?
Right.
And then
No,
the next thing is like,
paddleboard.
is that a gun?
Right.
You know, like, are you riding your gun today?
Yeah.
They just don't understand what it is.
Yeah.
I think the easiest way to talk about a glider is to just say it's as long as a longboard, or obviously longer. It's as long as a longboard, but you then like lean it out and like race it out, so it's a lot faster.
Yeah.
And then you get rid of all the things that most longboarders never use.
Yeah.
So when I say most longboarders never use, like most longboarders like don't nose ride. A lot of people that have a longboard don't nose ride.
Yeah.
They ride the longboard because of the wave catching ability and the wave count and just like the ease and the range, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously, like good nose riders rip on good nose riding boards.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people that have longboards like never even get on the nose. But what the glider does is it takes that longer length, very fast paddling, very fast down the line, but it like trims all the fat that you don't use.
Yeah.
And so what that obviously being the nose and the width of the board, these are narrower than what they would be if they were nose riders. And then it makes the board a lot noticeably faster through the water, both paddling and also down the line.
Really fast. Yeah, I noticed that immediately when I jumped on it, just how fast it was on the wave. It wasn't catching anything, the nose didn't catch, like everything, just water releases off the rails and it just goes. But then also paddling it, you feel like a hero.
Yeah.
Because it's got so much volume, but a lot of times longboards don't paddle all that well sometimes.
Right, they kind of plow the water out of the way.
Yeah, exactly, and this thing just was like a bullet. It just, very refined surf equipment.
Yeah, long and lean, like in any size board, you know, whether it be a 5.8 or a 10.6, like if you're long and lean, like that hull shape goes through the water with less resistance than like short and fat.
Yes.
Like for the same amount of volume, you know? So that's, you know, that's obviously part of it. I want to talk a little bit about the accessibility of these boards, because I've had, like with some of my gliders that I'm absolutely in love with, I've said, you got to try this, you got to try this. And they try it, and like the very first session, it's not like a hero board. Yeah. And then they're like, I'm out. Like, this is not for me. You know, it might be for you, but it's not for me.
11.0 can feel sometimes like a 8.0 or something like that on some of the gliders.
Yeah.
You know,
or if you don't know how to surf it, it can feel like a 13.0. Right. You know, and then because all of a sudden it like gets a mind of its own and starts going in a direction you never predicted. Very first time I loaned one of these out is to my buddy Seth Corbin from up in New York, who is about my size, or actually like straight up is my size. But he is a shortboard surfer. He is not, he doesn't even have a longboard in his quiver. Okay. Right, so it was like kind of the ultimate try. Like for somebody to try it out. Because he doesn't have longboard roots, doesn't have longboard like kind of muscle memory. He's just like a straight shortboarder. He got on, I gave him the 9.6. He got on the 9.6 and was like very first wave, like riding the thing like he had surfed it for a few years.
Nice.
Like really easy to get on and ride the thing and not have it be like quirky or like going off on a direction you had no idea it was going to go.
Yeah, very predictable.
And then he was starting to do like, you know, pumps and like wraps back into the pocket and like, you know, taking off late and like he was surfing the thing really well for somebody who doesn't longboard and has never ridden a glider in his life. And like having had the opposite experience with some other boards I've loaned out. Like I thought that was really cool.
That is really cool.
In these boards.
Definitely.
We talked about paddling and how well like gliders in general paddle. I would put these length per length at the top of the glider category as far as how good they paddle for their length.
Yeah.
And so like that 9.6 easily paddles like a foot longer than any other board
Absolutely.
I've surfed. Like it out paddles like my 10.6 like big wave guns. It out paddles like my 10.6 gliders.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the shape that Gerry put into it. It is like pretty wide point forward. Like when you look at this thing, it almost looks like an old school like Makaha gun more than like what a lot of the gliders are that are out there. And I think that has a lot to do with the paddle, like that having that width and that thickness up forward, like under your chest.
Yeah.
The thing just hammers like when you're paddling it and catching waves.
Yeah. Also, they don't have a whole lot of belly in it either, which I think helps. It doesn't push water. It's pretty flat entry as far as the rocker, and then it goes into V through the middle with some, you know, slight concave, but mostly V all the way through the tail. But a lot of gliders will have that really strong belly to them. And these, you know, Gerry opted to not have that, and then the rail kind of tucked. It's not, you know, it's tucked in on the bottom as well. It just sheds water really well. And I think this construction leads to it paddling well also. You know, it's nice and floaty, but it has some weight to it. It's not, it doesn't feel quirky or weird in the water at all, really, for how long it is, you know.
Like when you say, let's touch on the construction, because you say Surftech and you say epoxy, and then everybody just flashes back to Tough Light. And then, so it's super important to point out that like these boards are not made in Tough Light construction. Tough Light's awesome for like dropping your board in the parking lot or slamming it into your garage door. Like kind of rough and tumble, like ding abuse. But there are people that are pro or against it, like for the performance in the water. And these boards are not Tough Light. Like this construction is completely different. It's like stringered EPS core, epoxy resin, like that flax cloth, and it's much more made and weighted, you know, like a PU poly, but with more durability, like a longer lifespan as far as the flex, more ding resistance, and more breakage resistance than a poly would be as well.
Definitely. Another thing that really shocked me when you handed me this board was how small the fin was, for how large the board is. We talk about that a little bit. How do we fin these things? So
I always go small on fins in gliders. So like every glider that I have, like the fin is way smaller than you would think, right? And I've even heard some people say like, hey, all the fin is doing on a glider is just keeping the tail and back of the nose, right?
Okay.
Like you're not,
because it didn't spin at all. It didn't.
It doesn't.
Like when
you
you're
know,
riding, it locked right in.
Exactly. So on the 9.6, we have a 7.5 inch FCS Christensen single fin. And on the 10.6, I'm riding an 8 inch, the same fin, the FCS Christensen 8 inch fin. And they work.
It felt great.
Like you don't need more fin. The board feels really, really balanced. And when you put too big of a fin in on any glider, like what you immediately feel is you feel a board that's like, it's not neutral. Like, and so you have this really long board that you're trying to drift and conform into the curve of the wave, and it doesn't want to do it. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, the board looks good, but it feels bad. Right? You got a looks good, feels bad. Where once you get the right size fin and the board feels neutral, it'll actually drift into that curve of the wave. And then just go. Just like take off. You know,
no, it doesn't feel like an anchor at all. It just felt like it. Very neutral, like you're saying. You didn't even notice it, which is what you want.
Like that small day that you and I surfed on the south side, I gave you the 9.6. I grabbed the 10.6. I didn't have a fin in it. I grabbed the fin, which I thought was the 8, out of the back of my truck, and surfed, and that was, I still had a really good time, but the board was like noticeably harder.
I remember you being like, something's wrong.
Yeah, it was noticeably harder to surf than it had been in the past. I was like, oh, maybe this is just a really good 9.6 wave, but not a good 10.6 wave. What it ended up being is I put the 9 inch fin.
Just that,
it was the fin that I've been using in a different board. It looked exactly the same. I grabbed the wrong one, put it in quick, because you know, we were just frothing to get in the water. And then all of a sudden it had those feelings. Like it was like a little bit critical, like it was a little bit stiff, like it didn't want to like really fit into the wave as well.
Yeah.
So super important. Like 9-inch fin on a 10.6 board, you would think is totally normal.
Fine, yeah.
You got to go small on these fins. So 7.5 and 8 on the 10.6. And then lastly, let's just cover the range, like of kind of what these boards, what these boards are good for.
Yeah.
I mean, you could literally ride them in like kind of almost anything, except for like chunky death shore break.
Yeah.
Would be because then they get really, they don't feel long until you get them in that, and then they feel like 16 feet long. But any waves from like teeny tiny, all the way up to like second bar, third bar, a mile offshore.
Yeah.
They work really, really well. I was prior to using them, I was expecting to use them equally.
Right.
Like the 9.6 and the 10.6, but because the 9.6 paddles so well and catches waves so well, I ended up using it more for the whole range. I ended up never needing the 10.6 ever, like from a big wave perspective.
Okay.
Like on some of the really far outside bars, I would normally ride a board that big.
Yeah.
I just ride that board now because of how well it paddles.
Yeah.
But where the 10.6 stands out, like are those waves that like kind of break and then unbreak, but are at a 45, and then re-break, and then unbreak. Like this thing, you could just keep going and going and going. So there are a lot of places that have those small waves that break and unbreak.
Those little P Island waves that you could like connect all the way to town.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right,
or if it's just like a real facey wave, like if it's like South Shore Hawaii or Old Man's in California, like stuff like that. Santa. Like if you're gonna surf a wave like that, then the longer one is definitely in play. I just had an absolute riot. Like I surfed that 9.6 like for like literally every day, like during that run of swell we had last September, and just had some absolute magic sessions on it. Like just so fun.
And didn't hold you back at all. Being
ever,
a glider.
ever. Especially like when we had no waves for 5 months, and then the entire world came to Cape Hatteras.
Yeah.
It was nice to just sit on that thing and just keep racking waves and lapping.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, I just can't say enough good things about both of them.
You think you need a glider in your quiver? I mean,
you have to have a glider. You have to have a glider in your quiver.
Yeah.
It's just too much fun, and it turns like sessions that you wouldn't surf any of your other boards into really fun sessions.
Yeah.
Like you get into the waves so early that you make like crazy waves that you wouldn't make on your other boards.
Yeah.
And it's just shit, it's like the next dimension. Like Zach calls it being enlightened.
Yeah.
Like once you've seen the light of the glider, then you are enlightened, Yeah. And then so you have the enlightened ones and the ones that are not enlightened.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen you guys add them to your quiver, and then just like you can always surf no matter what.
Yeah, you can always surf, and it's like. And they're fast, like that's the one thing that people don't understand is like how much faster they are than longboards. Like you go back onto a nose rider and it feels like you're dragging a bucket behind the board compared to like how fast gliders go.
Yeah.
Some of the sessions again, like during the hurricane, all those hurricane swells, it was just nuts, because it's like this super long period, like way outside waves, which you like want to have a big board just to get to in the first place. Like some of these waves were like a mile off the beach. But then when you're on the wave, like the board never feels big because you just have so much canvas like on the wave. It's super fun. So obviously
you can be enlightened too.
I'm enlightened. I'm there and back and there again. So anyway, our affiliate's done. These are the Gerry Lopez gliders. They're awesome. If you have any questions about them or would like to order one, you can always reach us at the shop, 252-987-6000, or look us up online, realwatersports.com/surfing. We are here to enlighten you. Thanks for tuning in.